Hello everyone, and welcome to this festive roundup of the news agenda. With me, a festive Fleet Street Fox, and today I am joined by the Mirror's associate editor and fellow columnist, Kevin Maguire. Morning, Kev. So morning. We're going to look back over 2020 and we're going to ask ourselves, so this is Christmas, and what the hell have they been doing? You've been sending us your questions all week, and we've selected the best or worst to answer in this review of what may go down in history as the most interesting year on record. Have a look at this.
No, well, Victoria, I can tell you that I'm shaking hands continuously. I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody. You'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands. And I think it's very important that we, people obviously can make up their own minds. I think that Matt has said that people must make up their own minds, but I think the scientific evidence is, well, I'll hand over to the experts, but our judgment is wash. Washing your hands is the crucial thing.
Essentially trying to spread this out so that it doesn't all happen at once and overwhelm the NHS, and that you can actually delay it into perhaps the summer when it's a little quieter and the ordinary flu might have died down a wee bit. Is that what you're doing?
It's a very, very important question, and that's where a lot of the debate has been. And one of the theories is that, perhaps you could sort of take it on the chin, take it all in one go, and allow the disease, as it were, to move through the population.
So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection?
Owing to the lack of immunity, this disease is more dangerous, and it's going to spread further. And I must level with you, level with the British public. More families, many more families, are going to lose loved ones before their time.
So first then, Boris Johnson, in his first year in office, he closed Parliament, he broke the law, he won a landslide, he denied there was a pandemic, he succumbed to the pandemic, he slayed about 80,000 people, mostly by turning care homes into charnel houses. He had a brush with death, had yet another brush with parenthood, and had to face more splits than Craig Revel Horwood. Now, I think the question here is, Kevin, and one thing we'll be thinking about over Christmas is whether he can survive all that. Was he unlucky, or is he just incompetent?
Yeah, I think, well, he's been unlucky, but he is incompetent. The Russian revolutionary Lenin said there were decades when nothing happened, then there were weeks and months when decades happened. And I think in 2020, we've been living through those weeks and months when decades have been happening, because we've been through this unprecedented pandemic, or certainly unprecedented since the so-called Spanish flu in 1918. And we have, as a Prime Minister, someone who is just incapable of doing the job. And we saw there where you said, oh, I'm shaking hands, and I was at a hospital, and there were coronavirus patients. No, they weren't coronavirus
It's amazing to see, though, now, isn't it? To look back at
that was 3rd of March. I remember watching that. And we now know on the 3rd of March, when he's saying, I'm shaking everybody's hands, he'd had the advice from SAGE, the government's independent advisors, that we had to begin distancing, and he wasn't doing it. He was reassuring people, and that complacency and dithering in March resulted in possibly estimates of an extra 20,000 people dying. He's been an absolutely appalling, terrible Prime Minister. I thought David Cameron was bad. I thought Theresa May was poor, but Boris Johnson is now the worst of them all. People have died because of him. They've actually died.
And bad prime ministers, you could argue that they kill people in ways that you don't notice, but death rates can go up or down. But here we've seen the figures announced every night on the news. Now, Sean asks, and this is one of these conspiracy theories that goes around, do you really think Boris Johnson had a brush with death? We've got a government and a prime minister here who's so happy to there's so many dead cats on the table now. We're having dead cat for Christmas dinner, aren't we? So, I mean, I think that he did have this brush with death, because I think conspiracies don't happen, and that would involve so many people. It just wouldn't occur. But this is the problem, isn't it? That people like Sean don't believe now anything they say.
No, that's right. The internet speeded up conspiracy theories, which are around the world before truth gets its boots on. But no, he did have a brush with death. He was in intensive care. It humanized him in many ways and got him a lot of sympathy. But that wore off as other people began to die. But in order to have that as a conspiracy theory, and there's nothing wrong with it, you would have to involve so many doctors and nurses and other people at St. Thomas's Hospital in London. Look, it's nonsense. He was kind of lucky. He got very, very good medical care, but he was in intensive care. I remember the Friday night it was announced he was going into hospital, and look, it was grim for him. I think it did not him, because when he came out, he clearly wasn't himself for some time, and it made his decisions harder. But now, yeah, he did. He knows what it's like. He knows what it's like, and in a way, because he knows what it's like, I think it's even more annoying, frustrating, unforgivable that he continued to make big mistakes, which will result in other people getting ill, going into hospital, some dying, families mourning them. And that's you just got to come back to it. It would have overwhelmed any prime minister, but he's been particularly overwhelmed because I've known him for 30 years. And Boris Johnson is lazy, incompetent, a cynical liar, very poor judgment.
And a newspaper columnist, just the worst.
You don't want newspaper columnists to be prime ministers. You want them to be newspaper columnists. Exactly. And he just thinks a bit of a jolly jit all the time. You can just say things to get a reaction. He was that type of columnist. Anyway, I'm not sure how much of what he ever wrote he believed. A lot of it was certainly factually inaccurate, because the Telegraph a few times had to correct them. But now I think he's been found out. This is the year he was found out. And you go back to the 2019 election, he was on a wave of optimism. People gave him the benefit of the doubt. They quite liked him. Now they know him better. Well, the knives have been sharpened for him in the Tory party. He's lost the respect of a lot of MPs. I'm not saying he will be gone next year, but his authority is certainly loosened on his party.
Yeah, his trousers have definitely been pulled down, haven't they? Tony Curtis, I don't think it's that Tony Curtis, has asked, are we ever going to get straight answers from Loss-Link Johnson and his mates, as it's a bit confusing to know what to listen to and what to believe in? Tony, listen to the News Agenda and the Mirror, because what we say is regulated by an industry regulator, and you can check what we tell you. And if you don't like what we're doing, if we're not doing it right, you don't buy the paper and we all lose our job. So we keep trying to do the things that are right. So there you go. That's point number one. But this is kind of what I was saying, Kevin, isn't it? We've got a duplicitous government that is so happy to spin and constantly campaign rather than govern that we just can't rely on what they're saying. So whether it's a public health message or an election promise, they seem equally shonky, and that means that people have ignored the public health message. People are ignoring wearing masks, they're ignoring social distancing, they're ignoring whether this is serious, and the Russian bots or anybody else, the disinformation gets a foothold because the government is so lacking in any authority. And that's just
I think we've got to remember, Susie, that the majority of people do broadly comply with the rules and regulations on the virus, and they do wear their masks, and they follow it as best they can. But there's no doubt there's a significant minority who don't, and they'll believe any old nonsense. And I think Johnson being a stranger to the truth doesn't help counter the misinformation. And how do you know he's lying? Well, he opens his mouth, you see his lips move, and words come out. It just comes so easily to him.
Yeah, I think probably at this stage
can't help himself now.
Yeah, Chris Whitty might be a slightly more competent messenger than he is. Lastly, on Boris Johnson, his father-in-law famously said this year that he was gone in the fetlock, as though he was just a piece of horseflesh, and that COVID had kind of absolutely taken the stuffing out of him, and he was going to retire in the new year, and because he was tired and exhausted and was never going to be quite right again. Now, I don't. Also, you could argue that gone in the fetlock politically, in that he's lost so much political capital. He's spaffed so much up the wall to protect Dominic Cummings and all the other, and Priti Patel and all these other catastrophes he's had during the year. Protected his mates in his little group and his little gang, who everybody else thinks, literally in his own party, they think they should have gone. And there he is, going at last with his 50 grand pay rise on the way out the door. If he had any decency, he would hand that to charity, preferably an NHS charity. Now, this is the issue. In the new year, is Boris going to go, and are there moves afoot to stab him in the back? They're going to let him take the blame for Brexit and COVID, aren't they? And then get someone new in.
Yeah, Dominic Cummings there in May in the Barnard Castle. He's got the symptoms, so he heads up to Durham. Then he goes on his so-called eyesight test drive to Barnard Castle. Nobody believed it. I think that level of contempt, and there's one law and set of regulations for you lot and another for me, part of a democracy elite in Downing Street. Number of Tory MPs who rang me was incredible to say they were being overwhelmed by people calling, emailing, saying this is absolutely appalling. And there was a dent in public confidence in the regulations because of that. There'd been very clear messaging before, which would all stay at home. Cummings didn't. And Johnson, I think, spent a lot of his political capital backing him when he should have sacked him and shown him the door immediately. I think the skids are under Johnson. He hopes that he gets Brexit out of the way. People don't realise the economic damage. With a deal, never mind no deal. It just gets lost in the COVID crisis. COVID crisis itself, vaccinations mean from Easter as the latest plan. Remember, it's going to be Christmas and last summer never happened. But by Easter's latest plan for kind of go back to normal. You want to hope people give him the benefit of the doubt and to see progress going forward. There might be something in that for him, but at the same time, he's got enemies on the left and the right and the centre of his party. They backed him, those Conservative MPs, initially because they thought he was an election winner, and he proved to be an election winner. But he just can't go on. And people like Michael Gove will fancy their chances. So will Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, and perhaps Patel herself, Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary. All these people will be thinking over New Year, could next year be the year that if Tory MPs rise up, topple Johnson, then it could be a big chance. There is turmoil. He isn't a secure Prime Minister anymore. He just is.
Dominic Raab in Downing, or Priti Patel in Downing Street, it's enough to bring my sprouts back up. It's really bad. That's a bad nightmare at Christmas. Thanks, Kevin, for that.
We don't want to see your sprouts come back. It's not that type of channel. This in the discussion. I know. Well, you could say, would they be any better? Possibly not. But parties sometimes just want to gamble. There'd be more respect, I think, for Dominic Raab or Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, who I think is quite right wing, much more right wing than he's let on. He's spent reluctantly. I think his furloughing scheme was broadly very good, and I think it was too short term, and he kept chopping and changing, so people needlessly lost their jobs. And unemployment predicted to go up to 2.6 million, and I'm sure the Great excluded the 3 million people he hasn't covered. They'll be having terrible Christmas and New Year's because they haven't got any money. He will fancy his chances too. Will any of them make a fundamental difference to how Britain's governed? Well, you wouldn't know until they were in there, but we just know, and he proves it time after time, that Johnson just ain't up to it. I think he wanted to be Prime Minister, but he never wanted to do the job, did he? Seriously, I mean, he just didn't.
He fancied the shagging opportunities that Downing Street might offer him, I think, probably. God knows what that would be.
For legal reasons.
Cut that one out in the edit. Now, Royce says, I think Boris has done the best he can under the circumstances. And a lot of people give the benefit of the doubt because of the circumstances of COVID. And I think Labour might have made it worse. One thing, Kev, that a lot of people would probably forgive Boris Johnson, a lot of Labour supporters would forgive Boris Johnson for winning that election, is that it meant Jeremy Corbyn had a convincing loss. Finally, he went, and that led to a convincing win for Mr. Average, Keir Starmer, in this inevitable but very low-key Labour leadership contest we saw in the year. And in 8 months since then, he's managed to suspend Jeremy Corbyn, readmit him, then suspend him from the parliamentary whip. This anti-Semitism thing is still rumbling on without quite being resolved. And a lot of the surveys show that a lot of the country thinks Starmer is competent. He's better than Johnson, but he's dull. And he's tried to draw a bit of a veil over all this, but doesn't he need to do a bit more to get rid of the anti-Semitism stain before they can really move on?
Yeah, he isn't as dull as he's made out. I mean, yeah, you're not going to see him as a stand-up comic. He's got a pretty dry sense of humour in private, but he wants to be a serious man for serious times. And we've had all the jokes and the quips and the playing the clown and the buffoon from Johnson, and 60,000 plus people are dead, and Britain's suffering a worse economic slump than other comparable economies hit by the virus. So anti-Semitism, you're quite right, he's still got to deal with what you do with Jeremy Corbyn. As you say, he still hasn't got the whip back. How long can you sustain that? Does he have to come in, make an apology? Would he make an apology? Will he always now, just because of what's gone on before, be a problem for Labour moving on with the Jewish community and rebuilding links there? No, it's something he's going to have to wrestle with, Keir Starmer. But I'm not a Labour Party member. I would have voted for Lisa Nandy as leader. But I've got to say, I think he's done pretty well, and he's exposed Johnson because he's a prosecutor and he's competent.
Yeah, it's a journalist against the lawyer, isn't it? Every time. And the number of times I've told my journalism students and other trainees and stuff in the office this: if the lawyer picks a fight with you, you back down. You've got a point. They're going to win.
Yeah, well, he's smart. He's clever. He can build a case.
Well, he's correct. He reads his brief. He knows what he's talking about. He does his research. Johnson never did that.
No. Johnson will ruffle his hair while Starmer will read the brief, and he'll be on top of the brief. He's a prosecutor, and you can see him most Wednesdays when the Commons is sitting forensically taking Johnson apart, and Johnson has no answers. He answers questions that aren't asked to escape him. He can do that for a while, Johnson, but the truth is, other than the sycophants on his own side, they see his failings. And there's a lot of Tory MPs that admire Starmer. Now, there'll be some on the Labour left accusing him of selling out on policies and so on. We'll see how that goes down the line. But just as a person and a leader, it's why that confidence and that ability just to look like you are serious is why in some opinion polls he's preferred to Johnson as Prime Minister. And he's clawed Labour back in some ways. I keep thinking, shouldn't Labour be streets ahead because of everything that's gone wrong on the economy and with the virus and Brexit not what it was billed by Johnson? But in other ways, you think Labour was on its knees last December. So to get level pegging ahead in some polls, admittedly behind in others, is not bad, because the next general election mightn't be until as late as December 2024. So he's got some time to build his case, although I've noticed he's began shifting some of his attacks now, Starmer, away from Johnson and onto Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, who's the most likely successor. It's not automatic, but he's the most likely successor. And you can think that's right. Otherwise, the Tory government can just say, well, it's completely reinvented ourselves. Where you wanted a new government, you got a new government, we got a new Prime Minister. And then Labour has a problem at the election, which is what happened when the Tories dumped Theresa May in 2019 and put Johnson in.
Exactly. Now, Isla Northern says, should Keir Starmer be calling for a vote of no confidence in Johnson? He'll be safe enough with his majority, but the point would be to make the Tories own Johnson and his actions. I don't think there's any doubt that Boris Johnson is definitely a Tory, and that it will be on the Tories' legacy of however, history judges Johnson, which will probably be poorly. It will be a Tory legacy. Should Keir be really calling for an unwinnable vote of no confidence just to make a public statement of this is, the country's got no confidence in him. The politicians in this house need to show they're listening to the country.
No, I can understand the frustration and why it's not there. But he kind of shows, he takes Johnson apart regularly. I would argue. You call a vote of no confidence, you will unite the Tory tribe in Parliament against you. They'll vote as a bloc. You will fail, and you can just look opportunistic, and it hasn't got your advantage. If you pick a fight, you basically want to be able to win that fight. So I wouldn't call a vote of no confidence, because you just get hammered. People, it would look, right, you lose it, and it would look as if there is confidence in Johnson. So you could actually bolster him and it backfires.
Exactly. It only sort of is something that the supporters are going to like. Now, Brett Gibbs also had a very difficult year in that he got involved in a collision with a cyclist early this year. He was on it's the most metropolitan elite thing you could possibly think of. There's the leader of the Labour Party, who's a knight of the realm and a lawyer, in his hybrid powered SUV, driving through Islington, I think it was, to collect his shirts from the dry cleaners. Right. Now, we don't know quite how this case is going to play out. There was a collision with a cyclist who said, "How the hell did you not see me?" As this hybrid knocked him over. But this is kind of part of the problem. Corbyn had this issue, didn't he? Talking to the Labour grassroots, the Red Wall, which he lost, as well as trying to talk to the urban young and the cosmopolitan middle class. And Keir Starmer's got the same issue, but kind of from the opposite direction. He is Mr. Urban metropolis cosmopolitan elite, and he's still got to try and convince the Red Wall voters that he's the man for them with his hybrid SUV, dinging cyclists as he goes down the road. How's he going to do it, Kev?
Yeah, I hope he didn't, Keir Starmer, see a cyclist and think it was Jeremy Corbyn.
Boris Johnson.
And look, he's got to get out and around about the country, and people have to meet him, because he's a working class lad done good. People like that. I think the Tory attacks on his knighthood won't get them anywhere at all. People don't like knighthoods when they're given to cronies, party donors, all that sort of thing. But you got to remember, he came from his dad was a toolmaker, his mother was a nurse. He's done very well in life by his own efforts and hard work, and I think people will like that. I don't think he's as metropolitan elite as you make out. Usually they'll attempt to paint him like that. He's got to get out and about and show he ain't. I know he supports Arsenal, so he suffers a lot there. But there's nothing elitist now about supporting Arsenal. If you want elite, you have to in London. You support Spurs or Chelsea, because Arsenal have been surviving. But yeah.
So he's just going to get more football matches. We need to see the real you, Keir. If you're watching, get yourself out. There was a ridiculous moment in the House of Commons Prime Minister's questions where Boris Johnson said, "Oh yeah, you live in Islington," and Starmer said, "No, I live in Camden. It's next door, but it's still North London." But Johnson lived in Islington until his recent divorce, and he sold his house for a couple of £1 million. I think there was a complete lack of self-awareness on Johnson's part. I thought Starmer should have been sharper and thrown it back at Johnson. But he's got a knighthood star, and I think knighthoods are ridiculous. Abolish all those titles, get shot of them. But it won't do any harm in working class areas, because he is that working class lad made good, and people like people who do well, particularly when they remember where they came from, and the other people who haven't done quite as well. Yeah, perhaps we'll get a chance to see some more Keir in 2021. Now, across the pond, the epicenter of the free world has just about recovered its democratic stability after a solid 4 years of an overweight Oompa Loompa being in charge. Now, the planet held its breath for what turned out to be the really longest election count of all time, until eventually we realised Biden had probably won, and all these increasingly screamy tweets from the White House became this howl of grief as Charlie Bucket's granddad finally sent the Oompa Loompa packing, where he's now Maguire's front rim. What's next for Trump, though? Is he going to go, Kevin? What's he going to do next? He was a bad winner, and he's an even worse loser. He is going to have to be taken out kicking and screaming, and he's going to spend the next 4 years saying he might run again. It's kind of who thought putting a deranged reality TV star in the White House could go so dramatically wrong? But it's like us putting in Nikki from Big Brother. Who is she?
It's been an awful time, hasn't it? Because there's 300,000 Americans died from coronavirus. You were shown earlier on, he was talking about light in the body and disinfectant and so on. I have a mate who runs a GP practice in the Midlands, and after Trump said disinfectant might work, they had an elderly woman come in and who put Dettol on her salad, hoping it would save her from the coronavirus. Our stomach and treat our mouth for burns. Biden will just benefit because he's not Trump. I mean, I know I kind of should be sitting here now and taking a word as original in a cardigan and rocking on a chair, stroking me cat, because he's hardly inspiring Biden himself. But he ain't Trump, and that will gain him a lot of ground. And also, he will take tackling coronavirus seriously in a way Trump never did. Got it himself, Trump. Got the very best medical care other Americans' taxes could pay, given that we now know he paid no taxes himself. I think the next 4 years, Trump is going to spend most of his time trying to keep out of the clutches of the police and the authorities and not want to go to jail.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance he's going to be in court at some point in the next 4 years. But personally, I think it would be a good thing if he declared that he was going to run, because the Republican Party then would be split as to whether he was a good idea or a bad idea. Joe Biden would have a very nice 4 years in office with no opposition to speak of at all that would be in any way organised. Kamala Harris would have a nice clear run in 2024.
Yeah, I think Harris Biden is going to be incredible to watch, that tension there, because she's dynamic. She looks like the face of modern America. The Democrat Party could be the first woman president. While he spent his 8 years as Biden's deputy, he's had 4 years out. He comes in. He doesn't look as if he has a lot of energy.
The tank.
Yeah, exactly. But he can just be better for America by not being Trump, by not lying all the time, by not inciting hatred and racism and pandering to white supremacists, by favouring authoritarian regimes around the world, neglecting your democratic allies, by re-signing up to climate change control to stop the planet overheating. He can do all that, coming back to a rules-based government rather than having Trump, a loose cannon who just appeared to want to do property deals in North Korea.
Yeah, just be nice to have the grown-ups back in the room, wouldn't it? Now, Martin, do recent political shenanigans in the US and UK reveal that too much of both countries' proper functioning still relies on these unwritten norms and on those in charge having a functioning something, we assume, Martin? I don't know if the social media gremlins in backstage have not included your full tweet, full comment, but democracy apparently is they're having a functioning democracy. So I think, to be honest, yes, Martin, you're right. There is too much of this unwritten, especially in America. We will accept the result of a democratic vote. Well, Trump's gone, I don't have to, I'm not going to, and I'm going to start causing loads of consternation about it and stoking civil unrest because I can, and what should and shouldn't happen and what people will and won't accept.
Yeah.
The reason that moves there, isn't it, Kev, is because we put up with it and we go, this is entertaining. They're not doing what we normally see, so let's follow along behind.
I know, although being upbeat for a moment, American democracy and the institutions that withstood the test of Trump, he's going to be out. He can't barricade himself in the White House and refuse to leave despite clearly wanting to do that. But yeah, we elect politicians. You get a prime minister, a president, chancellor in Germany, whoever, and they have huge power and control. And somehow, who guards those guardians? How we control them is like it's been obsessing people since the ancient Greeks started discussing forms of democracy. Although remember they had slaves, so it was never one person, one vote there. I think it was one person, 20 slaves. But it's something. It's one of those philosophical discussions, and I think we need to strengthen democracy in the UK. I can't see why we have a House of Lords, which is unelected lawmakers for life. I chuck in why we have a hereditary royal family. There's too much power being taken from local government. No, I think we need to sort of strengthen democracy, but you've got to put the institutions in, and people want to have to participate. Too many people are happy to sit back and not participate.
Yeah, unfortunately, this kind of thing puts a lot of people off. doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we have even local elections in this country. I think there was about 300 council seats last time, which were entirely uncontested, and whoever was nominated for that just was elected, without any votes being cast. And that's the way that democracy starts dying, if that happens at the local level, because that's who affects your bin collections, the local planning applications, the potholes in your roads, the schools that your kids go to. And if you start not paying attention to something, whole house falls down.
And I've got huge admiration for most people who stand for elected office and become councillors, or they get on parent-teacher associations, school governors, lots of different things, because it's quite a commitment, and you're giving your time up, a lot of effort. You'll get a lot of flack. People will always want a bit of you. So I can see why a lot of people are reluctant to get involved, but for a really fully functioning, vibrant democracy, we do need more people involved. That's what we do. Yeah. That's what we need.
And Pointless Brexit, I don't think that's the real name, asks, how does the government think it can get away with the complete mess it's about to land on us? I think you answered that earlier on, Kevin, didn't you? Because coronavirus, the huge hole that's going to make the world economy, is going to suck up and subsume the huge hole of Brexit.
No, that's right. The economic hit so far, government about 4% of the economy, economic growth is gone because of Brexit. It's just not what was promised. It's not what Johnson promised in 2016. I understand there'll be people now watching and say, yeah, let's just get Brexit done. He never had an oven-ready deal at all. I don't even have the ingredients for it. That was another lie. But many people are just fatigued by it and tired for it and just want it to go away. But I think it's been one of the great cons by Johnson and Farage and the others. They promised what never existed. They had nostalgic ideas of sovereignty. They all got 350 million quid a week for the NHS, which was said by Dominic Cummings, who ran the Leave campaign, to be absolutely pivotal. Well, it just doesn't exist. Trade deals were never going to be easy. So all that time, all that effort, all that division, all that poison that's been spilled, all those arguments, was it worth it? Most people think not now, which is why you see polls say, with hindsight, do you think it was the right thing to do to vote to leave in 2016? The majority of people think not.
Now, we don't want to end on a bad note, right? Because 2020 has been a year, let's face it. And a lot of us are facing Christmas now without a loved one who should have been here with us. But we want to throw forward to 2021, and there's lots of good things to think about. We've got some footage here of the first woman in the world receiving the first approved coronavirus vaccine in the world. And this is Margaret Keenan, a 90-odd grandmother who's done the right thing. And who's absolutely fine and dandy, we should all point out. Doesn't have any microchips in her for any of those naysayers. And this is the kind of tiny little pinpoint of hope we have in the future. Not only are the vaccines starting to get rolled out around the world, not only are most of us going to take them, but we should be glad, Kev, shouldn't we, that the grown-ups are coming back in the room. We've had years of infantile politics, these toddlers throwing tantrums all the time. But now Biden's back in control in America. Trump is out, the man who enabled Nazis and pussy grabbing and corruption, which became a way of life and something that could be pardoned rather than jailed for. Normality is starting to reassert itself. We have hope and optimism for 2021, don't we?
We do. I think the vaccine is there. Look, I'd have had my jab yesterday if I would. I can't wait to get it, because it's the way forward. You'll get the anti-vaxxers with their lies and disinformation, their conspiracy theories, but most people are sensible and they realise it's the way forward. And I think it's brilliant. I was thrilled that the UK was the first country in the world to start being vaccinated, but then I hated the flag waving jingoism that somehow made us somehow better than the rest of the world. When you think this vaccine was developed in Germany by two scientists of Turkish heritage for an American company that is manufacturing it in Belgium. Look, we live in an interconnected world. Britain is part of that world. A big player in the world in many ways. We're not the most significant, but we're a big player there. Let's be happy with that. Let's not try to pretend we're exceptional or special so we can look down on other countries and turn in on ourselves.
No, we are all exceptional. There are lives around the world that are going to be saved by these vaccines, including those developed in the UK. And we've got
Susie, we've got to make sure it's made available. Certainly the AstraZeneca one, which I think is cheaper than Pfizer, the AstraZeneca Oxford University British vaccine, really. That'll be cheaper. Let's get it around the world. Let's get it to poorer nations. So, save lives here, but save lives elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Some positive news. Thank you for watching, everybody. That was the year that was. Hopefully, we've given you a bit of a clue about what will be the news in the year that's coming up. Thanks for joining me, Kevin. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, wash your hands and thank whoever your gods may be that 2020 is almost done. Bye-bye.
Bye.